A full payload of bombs. That's how Donald Trump is describing a US attack on Iran tonight. The president claiming he's obliterated the country's nuclear capabilities.
I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success.
3 US strikes, 3 Iranian nuclear facilities, Natanz, Esfahan, and most importantly, Fordow.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
That claim constituting a major feat. Fordow, buried deep beneath a mountain, is at the heart of Iran's nuclear program. The US, the only country with bunker-busting bombs capable of destroying it.
There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history.
The attacks come after days camped out in the White House's Situation Room amid wild speculation over Trump's next move.
As the president said, he would decide within 2 weeks. However, 2 days is within 2 weeks.
The fact that President Trump authorized strikes on these 2 other nuclear facilities as well indicates that he wanted to make sure that this job was done.
Iran playing down the attacks, claiming all sites had been evacuated. None contained radioactive material and that Fordow has suffered no irreversible damage. Threats now flying from all sides, Trump putting Iran on notice.
Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
Iran says the US started a dangerous war and is vowing vengeance, saying no US citizen in the Middle East, including its 40,000 service members, is safe.
There's a lot of fear as to what escalation this can cause in the region. There are other regional actors who could potentially get dragged into this as well.
The UN begging all parties to calm down.
At this perilous hour, it is critical to avoid a spiral of chaos. There is no military solution. The only path forward is diplomacy. The only hope is peace.
So with tensions at an all-time high, is it now too late to avoid all-out war?
CEO of the US Studies Centre, Michael Green, is here to give us his take on the situation. Michael, is America at war?
Well, dropping 30,000-pound bunker-busting bombs on a nuclear site is an act of war. So in that sense, yes, but the US Congress hasn't declared war. And I think, reading from President Trump's statements, the U.S. intention is to have this end now. So yes and no. The goal in the U.S. and I think the goal of U.S. allies should be to make sure there's no further escalation and no war between the U.S. and Iran.
Well, given what Iran has said, a statement released within the last couple of hours or so, it looks like they're ready to fight back.
Well, that's not at all surprising. Remember, this is a regime that has called for the destruction of Israel, the death of America, has attempted to overturn friendly states all across the Gulf. It's an extremely dangerous regime. So the rhetoric's not surprising. The question is, what will Iran actually do? And, you know, in an earlier time, I think people would have been very worried about Hamas or Hezbollah acting as proxies for Iran to attack the U.S., Israel, and others, or would have worried about Iranian missiles. But their proxies are in disarray because of Israeli attacks. Their missiles are being depleted. The Iranian air defense system is close to destroyed. So Iran is not in a very strong position to escalate into a wider war. What they might do is assassination or terrorism. So we're not, you know, out of the woods yet. This was a risky move by President Trump, but not as risky as it might seem at first glance. Iran's ability to actually prosecute a larger war is very limited right now.
So, yeah, risky move. Why did Trump pull the trigger on it? I think it took a lot of people by surprise.
You know, the strategic case for this move, I alluded to earlier, which is the Iranian nuclear weapons capability, was unacceptable. There was an apparent disagreement between the U.S. and Israel on how close they were to weapons. But in some ways, if you're Israel or if you're worried about Iranian intentions, it doesn't matter. So that's the strategic case. What we don't know is the timing. And, you know, I worked in the White House for 5 years. There's a deliberative process for these things. And Donald Trump doesn't do that. He sort of makes snap decisions. There is a strategic case to be made for this. I think people will be asking, well, what was the real reason? And I don't know the answer.
What's the likelihood of Iran striking US targets around the Middle East, do you think?
Well, You know, the Iranian chief of intelligence, the head of the Quds force, was taken out by drones in Iraq a few years ago because he was in the country preparing for an attack on the U.S. embassy in Baghdad. I used to eat lunch in Washington, D.C. at a restaurant that was famous because Iran was preparing to blow up the Saudi ambassador at that restaurant. So we know that Iran can be quite violent, and we know that they're probably motivated to have revenge. On the other hand, as I said, their air defenses are depleted. They're on their back. And it was interesting when President Trump said somewhat crudely, we know where the leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, is, and we could take him out. It sounded like bravado, but it also might have been a deterrent. Don't escalate, because we could do bad things to you. So I'm not sure that I don't think Iran can broaden the war. They'll be looking for ways to retaliate, but their options will be limited.
Donald Trump famously campaigned as the anti-war president. A lot of his voting base valued that about him. If there is a response and this starts to escalate, how far do you think he would go? Is it possible we would see US boots on the ground here?
Yeah, I don't think there's a likelihood of US boots on the ground. This is not Iraq. This is not regime change. Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel has used the word regime change, but that's not what Donald Trump is trying to do. It's not what the American public would support. Memories of Iraq are still fresh in everyone's mind. The politics, look, it's very interesting. Trump's coalition is full of contradictions. There are pro-Israel war hawks. There are anti-interventionist isolationists. What people are realizing is Trump doesn't answer to them. He does what he wants. And frankly, the anti-war isolationists are very unhappy, but they don't have much power without Donald Trump. So I think he feels comfortable he can make the decision.
Dr. Michael Green, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Right.